Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. On today's video, we're going to be taking a look at something that can improve the video quality on the Commodore 128. This was actually a mail call item that I received sometime back in 2020, and I just haven't been able to get to it, so finally getting to it today. There's a little hodgepodge of different parts and stuff that came with, but primarily I'm going to be focusing on getting the 128, which is on the bench behind me, improved in the picture quality department. It's definitely known for having really bad jail bars on the 128, and that's what this product is here to improve. At least it's supposed to. So without further ado, let's get right to it. All right, we have a package here from Canada. This one comes from Jason in London, Ontario. That's not far outside of Toronto. Hi to all my Canada viewers. I have a cousin who lives in London, actually. All right, so two small boxes, and we have a couple letters here. Dear Adrian, I've included a number of PCBs for you to find parts for and build. There's a 27C080 adapter for 23-128, 23-256, and 23-512 sockets useful for internal function ROM sockets of the C128. There's a TO3 adapter, which is an LM323K. It's kind of a voltage regulator for up to 3 7805 LDOs in parallel, or one switching regulator, which is a 78SR TO220 package. He's included a 6526 kernel switcher adapter with the schematics online. This works great for 64/128s and also a VIC-20. It outputs a 3-bit value, can be rewired, so the LED output pin is the 4th data output, shunting resistor, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it sounds like that's a kernel switcher that if it goes under the 6526, it must allow you to use the keyboard to switch between different kernels. He's included a 6502 RAM expansion PCB pair. This is great for like a 1541 where the RAM expansion up to 24K, I think, and low power memory replacement. He also says that he's going to have a mechanical C128 keyboard available soon. I will start producing in low quantities based on the original keyboard, but with a full F key set and cursor controls. Also open source Monster cartridge using a Cortex M7 4 to 480 megahertz. It'll be an ARM processor based on the Kung Fu Flash, runs Easy Flash images and a slew of other cards and functions. He writes, good luck. I will be happy to answer questions for anything I have missed. By the way, nearly all SMD caps and resistors are the same size, 0805 inches, or that's 2012 millimeters. J. Okay, and oh yes, okay, so here on this paper, it talks about the ClearVideo 128. It's a LumaFix that he's come up with that apparently actually works. I have complained, I think, numerous times about the fact that LumaFixes, especially on the 64, don't seem to really work, at least the ones I've tried. And then apparently there's one for the 128, which has pretty bad video output quality. And the one that's out there floating around apparently really doesn't work, at least from the reports I've heard. But he tells me that his is quite different and does work. So even though this is called ClearVideo 128, it is for the C64 assembly 25469, also the 128, 128D, and 128 DCR, both PAL and NTSC. And he also has a paper here for ClearVideo for the VIC-20, which if I recall our conversation, let me just read the paper here. Yes, it disables the composite output and it gives you S-video on the VIC-20. How awesome. Let's see what's in these little boxes here. Assume these are the PCBs and the products. Inside the first little box, there were two little packages, and inside this bag are two little boards. One is a 6502 to W65C816. That's right. And then the second little board that's in here, I don't have my magnifying goggles on, so I can't really have a hard time reading the tiny type, but this might be one of the LumaFix type boards. And then inside this other bag here, this is the assortment of little PCBs. So I'll stick them back in this box for now. We'll take a look at those in a second. All right, in the first bag, there's a 3D printed little thing here. We have some wire length and a few pin headers. And looking in the instructions for the ClearVideo 128, I see some wires being run around the board, and there's a little circuit board that goes where the RF modulator is. I am pretty sure that's what this is for here. This replaces the RF modulator on the board, allows you to mount the PCB at the correct height, which I think he gives you an S-Video jack. So you have a direct S-Video feed out of your device for the best possible picture quality. This is the little adapter for that. And in the other bag, sure enough, that's exactly what this is. This is the little board. That's the ClearVideo 128 that replaces your RF modulator, gives you S-Video, and there's an audio jack directly on here. Awesome assortment of stuff, Jay. Let's take a look at this stuff on the bench. All right, so this is all the stuff that Jay sent. It's an absolute boatload. Let me move the ClearVideo stuff out of the way, the 128 ClearVideo, because I'll be working on that last. I think that goes with it. So that leaves us with this stuff. So let's quickly take a look here. So we have two TO3 adapters. TO3 are the metal can voltage regulators. You see these on like the PET, inside of 1541 disk drive, stuff like that. And these little adapter PCBs he's made allowed you to use standard TO220 voltage regulators, which are the little black packages with 3 legs on them. And you can put 3 in parallel because often these big metal TO3 packages have the ability to carry a lot of current. So that's pretty handy if you're gonna retrofit your 1541 or your PET or something and you wanna use something a little bit more modern. They even sell little switching versions of those TO220 packages that would work in these adapters. And then we have these little adapters here. These allow you to use 27C080 EPROMs in place of 27C128s. In the past, you've probably seen me make adapters by hand by wiring a couple sockets together, and these little adapter PCBs allow you to do that without having to do a whole socket thing. Depending on which ROMs you use, you have to set some of these little resistor jumpers on the bottom. So keep that in mind. I think you can buy all of these adapters and things on Jay's Etsy store. Next up is this, which is the Super Zaxxon Duo cartridge. Now, another viewer actually sent me a completed one of these. Super Zaxxon is a cartridge for the C64 that is known to be really good at testing PLA compatibility. So if you want to make one yourself, you can pick up one of these PCBs, and I think actually Jay might sell one completely assembled, although I can't remember off the top of my head. Either way, it should be pretty easy. It's a ROM and a couple other components on here, and that allows you to have your own Super Zaxxon. And then next up is this, which is a ClearVideo 64, which is basically a LumaFix for the 64. And I have one here. I don't think this is Jay's, or I have two actually in this box. These aren't Jay's design. His is a little different. This goes under your VIC-2 chip, and supposedly you can adjust these potentiometers to fix the jail bars. Personally, I've never found these to work for me. They change the jail bars, but they don't get rid of it. And next up is this, which is a 6502 to 65C816 adapter. The 65C816, of course, is used in things like the Commander X16, but also the Apple II GS, and I'm sure there's other machines as well. It's a 16-bit hybrid version of a 6502, well, C02. There are some wiring differences, which is why you can't just plug it in. So you need this little adapter, but it's mostly passive. There's a couple things on the back there. But yeah, if you put this into your computer, like into a VIC-20, not for a 64, but into a VIC-20, you would have access to those extra instructions. But there are some differences with the processor as well, even in compatibility mode, which might break other programs. And next up, we have a couple PCBs of Sven Petersen's kernel switcher. You can check this out on his GitHub page, on Sven's GitHub page if you're interested. I think it's sort of, I don't even know if he adapted my code at all. That project I did quite a while back using an Arduino to switch the kernel. I think this goes under the 6526, if I recall. And you have to solder an SMD AT Mega microcontroller on there. Load that up with code, and this allows you to push keys on the keyboard to select which ROM image you're going to use. You do need to have a ROM adapter under your kernel ROM with some wires to go to this. And the LED as well can change color and stuff. So, and then Jay sent me a couple of these, which are dodgy PLA PCBs. This is a PLA replacement that uses, I guess it's a CPLD, something like that, to replicate the PLA. I think this is an open source project. I have so many PLAs now, I don't need to build any more up, but this is an option. If you check on eBay or maybe on Jay's store, people will be selling these dodgy PLAs, and I'm pretty sure they're decent replacements. I don't know how compatible these are because I've never tested these, but I assume they work pretty well. but we have lots and lots of alternatives now. The Gal PLA being a really good one. That thing is 100% compatible with everything. Next up is this, which he says is a universal 6502 RAM expander. He says it works great for the 1541, but it allows you to surface mount some SRAM chip on there, I guess, and give you some RAM expansion. I don't know how to select how much RAM you're going to be giving your computer, like if you want to use this in a PET, because you need to add the RAM into a very specific part of memory, or like a VIC-20 or something. But yeah, there we go. We have this little thing here, ClearVideo. I assume this is the VIC-20 S-Video mod, I guess. Not quite sure. A ton of little tiny SMD components. And I am so bad at doing SMD right now that I will have to leave that for a future time. And there's also this little PCB here, which I'm not sure what it is. I don't think he wrote in the letter, and it doesn't say anything on it. It's got a couple SMD chips, a few other pin headers, and it does something. Okay, there's actually one more thing here, which is this, which I think is the ClearVideo VIC-20. It doesn't say on here what it is. It would certainly help me out if it had the name of the product silkscreen on it. ClearVideo 20 has instructions here. Seems like it was a test board. Remove the VIC chip, insert the device, and blah, blah, blah. You'll need to solder 2 wires from the board. Okay, so this goes under your VIC chip on the VIC-20, and then there's some wires that go from this, and it looks like you put them right to the connector on the back of the VIC-20. The only thing is, Jay is talking about removing the RF modulator from the VIC-20. The VIC-20s that I have don't have RF modulators. That's an external part. I think the later VIC-20s that have the newer motherboard design actually have an RF modulator on board, and maybe they have the connector that matches the 64, the video connector with the more pins. But my VIC-20s all have 5-pin video connectors that don't have space for Chroma and Luma. So I guess I'd have to figure out how to wire this up. If you have a VIC-20 and you're interested in ClearVideo from it, this might be the project for you, especially S-Video. It's kind of cool. All right, now to the meat of the episode. We have the ClearVideo 128. Here it is, the little 3D printed thing that goes underneath for the RF modulator, and the wires and the instructions. What I'm a little shocked at and a little daunted by is the length of the instructions. Now, I'm sure this is extra long because he's very detailed, just so anyone can make this. But it starts here on page 1, 9 steps. And then we have through 30 steps, 10 through 30. And then we have 31 to 37. That's a lot of steps. I have one of my C128 flats that this is going to go into, and I think first thing to do is plug that into the retro tank and capture a little video just so we can see what the before video looks like on that 128. All right, here's my 128 flat here. Yes, it's an NTSC version, and this is just through regular composite, and we're on the regular 128 basic screen. Just take a look at those jail bars, especially in the gray section there. The sharpness or whatever, that has nothing to do with it. That's just the composite. But those jail bars, they're so ugly. Let's go to 64 mode. And there are those jail bars again. Wow, those look pretty horrible. It's far worse than any 64, these jail bars. Really, really bad. And this is just Commodore. They overloaded the VIC-2 in this machine with more functions, and I guess it just made it even noisier. Let me switch over to S-Video, see if those jail bars are worse. And now we're looking at the S-Video output, and you can tell right away that the text is so much sharper. I wouldn't necessarily say that the jail bars are any worse or better, but definitely the text is a million times better. This is a completely stock and unmodified machine, so the RF modulator is the original one, which explains a little bit of the chroma delay. If you notice over there, the edge here between the gray and the green, there's a little bit of a smudge where the green starts, and that's really caused by a chroma delay. And it's really visible around all the letters as well, where you could see that the gray is actually a little bit green because the whole chroma image is shifted over slightly from the Luma. It's happening right here too along this edge. Some of the green is bleeding over into the gray. I think I could correct that inside the RF modulator by removing one of the coils probably. One of the inductors is causing this. But nonetheless, this is how a stock machine looks in 128 mode. And it's quite possible those things will be remedied or fixed up a little bit with the ClearVideo 128 installed. And here we are on 64 mode. Terrible, terrible jail bars. Not so much on the chroma smearing, but that's because the blue and the blue, there's not a lot of chroma difference, we just have a luma difference here, so you don't notice that so much. But if I type something in a different color, like yellow, you can really see the chroma smearing there, especially on the cursor there. You see how it's bleeding through? Hopefully that's going to be fixed as well. So we'll look for that once this thing is installed. So at this point, it's time to take this machine apart and install the ClearVideo 128. I am not going to be doing this as an instructional video. That would make it like 2 hours long. I'm just going to time lapse it and we'll be able to see the results. Okay, so it's installed in the machine. Let me sum up my thoughts on that install process. Very, very fiddly. There's a reason why the instructions are as long as they are. A lot of it has to do with trying to get this thing in with the right alignment, because the hole in the case here for that had the RF connection originally, it's not very big. So there isn't a lot of leeway when you have the S-Video connector there. If you want to be able to plug and unplug the S-Video connector easily. So the whole board is like kind of off kilter, which is how it's supposed to be. And you have to align these alignment pegs and the 8 pins that go in the motherboard. And you got to do it in the case because you need to make sure that it's in the right spot. So you can't just hold it in the right spot and then solder it together, because all of the pins have to bend and move to get them just right. And I spent a lot of time tweaking that. In fact, I didn't end up using this 3D printed thing he sent because I had to trim it quite a bit to even get it to fit. But even when it did fit, the board was hitting it and the alignment wasn't right for the headphone jack, stuff like that. So in the end, I aborted that. It took a lot of fiddling. Here's a close-up of the installed board. So there are 2 coax wires that run to 2 different points. And then these wires here are power unregulated. I have to say on the instructions for the unregulated power is very vague about where to connect those. The most it says about where to connect them, it just says, this is typically connected across the largest internal capacitor. That's it. So you have to know to connect that. I assume that's going to be a little bit different from one machine to another, but I figured out that that was the capacitor that it wanted. And of course the polarity does matter. This has about 13 volts across it when the machine is powered up. And then for the 2 coax wires where you connect those up, he does have pictures. He does describe in the instructions where to connect those, but he says like on the 128, it's next to U28 or whatever, and there's no U28. U20 is there and whatever. I use the picture. And there's one thing to consider when you put this in here, you no longer have composite video on this machine at all. It only supports Luma Chroma or S-Video. I think he has an option to down convert to composite, and I think that might have been one of the little boards he gave me. I'm not totally sure, but he does say on his website that that is sold out right now. So please keep that in mind. And again, the installation, be ready for a very long, fiddly, potentially frustrating install process. I got a little frustrated now and then trying to get this thing in here. Jay does not mention in the install instructions anything about whether the onboard DIN connector for that had the video and audio output before still works. I don't even know, I haven't tested that. If it does still work, my advice to you is give up on the whole fiddly alignment thing and just install this. You won't be able to plug the S-Video into the connector, but who cares? Just continue to use the DIN cable. Let's give that a quick test to see if that actually still works. All right, let's see. It does still work. Wow. So Jay, if you're watching this video, could you please put in the instructions that the DIN still works for audio and video output after this is installed? So if you don't want to deal with all the alignment stuff, you can just install this without having to worry about that. That would have saved me so much time and frustration. All right, enough going on about the installation process. Let's talk about how this is actually working now that this is in here. So you'll see on the screen here, this is the standard 128 basic prompt. I have it going through the RetroTink. Of course, it's over S-Video because there's no other way to hook this machine up. And I did spend about maybe an hour, hour and a half adjusting this thing. There's 4 controls, and you can imagine they interact with each other. This is pretty much as good as I can get it on this screen. And you'll notice it's actually pretty good. Definitely the smearing for the chroma signal is far reduced compared to how it was pre-mod. So that's nice. That's definitely an improvement. Sharpness is fine. It looks pretty good. Definitely the jail bars are greatly reduced. Now you might be able to notice that the gray section though, it's not completely smooth. And no matter what adjusting I can do, I can't get it to be completely smooth. Also in the green border, there are some, you could see a little bit of lines going on there. It's way less than it was before. And I'll be able to compare on screen here what the before and the after looks like. And I'm sure there's a pretty dramatic difference. But just like the one on the Commodore 64, this is still not perfect by any means. I'm gonna power the computer off. I don't have a keyboard hooked up, so I can't go to 64 mode, but I will put in the Kung Fu Flash here. So that will force it into 64 mode, and it's gonna load a game. I will hook a keyboard up in a second so we can take a look at that just at the static 64 basic prompt. But notice here in the blue section of the background, which is the same blue as the text box, the typing area in basic, there are some lines. Now I think again, it's far less than there were before, but it's still there. And I can tell you, I spent a ton of time trying to dial it in. Really the problem I found is as you adjust this thing to make, say, the blue look good, then you go switch to some other color and there are lines there now. And you adjust it to make it look good on that color and you switch back to blue and there are lines again. You just have to settle in some kind of a middle ground where you minimize the lines across the different colors, and that's as good as it's gonna get. While I was calibrating, after I did it for a while on the LCD through HDMI here, I hooked it up to the Sony PVM here to look at that, and I'd say that the lines are actually a bit worse on here than they show up on the RetroTink. I think this monitor is just so high resolution that any kind of high frequency noise in the video signal is shown. The RetroTink must do some filtering that it sort of minimizes them. So what you're seeing through the capture is of course through the RetroTink. So yeah, keep that in mind. Keyboard is connected, so we'll just do Go 64, and now you can just look at the way that the blue looks. There it is again. The border, yeah, it's pretty good. Definitely has a little bit of stuff going on, but the main part of the blue, which is the same as what we were looking at in Radar Rat Race, it's got lines. We'll try one more cartridge here. I didn't try this on the before, but it's my Easy Flash cartridge, which I'm used to the way the menu looks in 64 mode. I wish I had tested this on the machine before I did the mod, because I'm feeling that the overall color saturation is a little low. Now, one of the 4 controls on the ClearVideo is the chroma level, and you can turn it way down and you can actually desaturate the picture until it becomes black and white. But I have that turned up to a good amount, the correct amount, because when it's too low, you see these weird dot patterns, so that's gone, but it's still not super saturated. I mean, it looks fine, but it's just not great. Okay, so let me summarize the ClearVideo 128. The installation process, very, very fiddly, especially if you're trying to align the ports on it with the holes on the back of the case. Like I said earlier, if I knew that the onboard DIN port would have continued to work, I would not have bothered trying to get those ports aligned. I do not care about plugging an S-video cable into my 128. So keep that in mind if you are getting one and you go to install it yourself. Save yourself the massive hassle by aborting all of that fiddling around and just mount it in the board and call it good. Now, Jay's charging around $50 for this product from his Etsy store. So if you are interested in that, I'll put a link in the description below to his store. Am I happy that I modded my 128 with it? Yeah, I think it definitely improved overall the picture quality. It got rid of those really distinct lines that we saw before, and now it sort of replaced it with a little bit of waviness. I really wish I could get a perfectly solid, clean output, but I just don't think that's possible from the VIC-2 chips. I think you really need to replace it with an FPGA solution, kind of like the Kowari that I looked at on the channel before, because that'll give a perfect HDMI or VGA output with absolutely no interference whatsoever. But we're dealing with chips from the mid-80s here, and they were noisy from the very start, and there's just only so much you can do to cancel out all that noise. I would also like to add that any commenter that uses an RF modulator this size, which is all the 128s and I think the shortboard C64s, are compatible with the ClearVideo. So it doesn't just work in the 128, it could work on any of them. If you have a ClearVideo 128 in one of your machines and you're able to get like a perfectly clear image on all colors, I'd love to hear about that in the comment section below and maybe give me some tips on adjusting those potentiometers. But spending an hour doing it and really kind of just splitting the difference between the colors was the best I could do. So that's going to be it for this video. If you liked it, I appreciate a thumbs up. If you didn't, you know what to do, and all the comments and subscribe, etc., etc. Don't forget to check out my second channel. There's all sorts of fun videos being posted over there. And I want to thank all my patrons who are supporting the channel now. That's just absolutely amazing. You'll see their names scrolling up the side of the screen right here. So that's going to be it. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.